Oh, okay. A little bit late on the stream today, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, let me pull this article up. Give everybody some time to join in. Yeah, we're going to talk about the top 25 D1 baseball just came out with. Again, I think D1 baseball is probably as accurate as anybody. I mean, because they really do the work as far as seeing all these teams throughout the fall. I mean, they do reports on everybody. So, again, these are never going to be very accurate because baseball is baseball. But we'll get into it here in a second once everybody joins. Canes, what's up, man? What's up, Canes? Try to angle my thing here. What's up, Zach? What's up, man? How you doing? Welcome back to the stream, guys. Yeah, sorry about the a little bit late today. Hadn't done any videos. Long story short, this past weekend was a tough one. Both my kids, stomach bug, just ran through my entire family. So usually I do videos. Usually I do put YouTube videos out during the weekend. Wasn't able to do any of that because we were battling. But luckily it looks like we've kind of gotten through. So say a prayer that it stays that way. And I was the only one that dodged it. Like I had a serious, head cold, headache, sinus pressure, but nothing, stuffed nose, just annoying. But everyone else in my family was not good. And so I was the one having to take care of everyone, making dinner, cleaning the house, everything. So it was a long weekend. So gonna give everybody a few more minutes to get in here because obviously I was a little bit late, and then we just kind of came on camera right away. Seeing Troy ranked number 25 is interesting. Yes. I mean, Skylar Mead's done a heck of a job there, obviously. I mean, he is probably at the top of the list if some Power 5 jobs come up. Let's say this summer, he's definitely going to be top of the list. He's young, which is what kind of schools are looking for. I mean, they want proven head coach, right? And what he's done at Troy so far has been really good recruiter, good pitching guy. And Troy is one of those schools. Like there's a lot of assistant coaches out there at Power 5 or Power 4s that don't want to. Seems like they're pretty picky with the head coaching job, but I think Skylar made the right move, like going from South Carolina to the Troy job, because Troy is one of those mid-major programs in the Southeast that if you put the work in, like you're going to win there. They have good facilities. You can recruit Georgia, Alabama. I mean, the prime states, Florida. And again, you prove yourself at a school like that as a head coach for just a few years, like he has. 37 and 22 last year. He's going to be top of the board as far as Power 4 jobs that open who may not be paying a primo price. So if you're a Power 4 school that doesn't want to pay like your top echelon of earners, like over $1 million plus, he's going to be the next guy. He's going to be that guy. So I think warranted that Troy's there. Again, we'll get into the rankings here soon, Zach, and just what I think of them and how they typically turn out. So we'll get into it in a second. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because I will say, like, the thing that D1 baseball does better than anyone else is, like I said, they go out there and really watch these teams. So like they more than anyone are going to have probably the most accurate as you can have in preseason rankings. And so they're going to put probably more mid-majors up there than other ranking places that aren't, they know there's other like Baseball America and all these other websites and publications that rank college programs. They don't quite have the ground game that D1 baseball has, I will say. But let's all right, we've waited long enough. Now let's pull this up here. Let me make sure we got it. I'll fix it in a second. Okay. All right. So, Texas A&M, preseason number 1. So, what's the interesting thing here? Texas A&M, we all know kind of the drama that went down at the end of the College World Series last year with Schlossnagle going to Texas, right? We all know the stuff that happened there. And that sent shockwaves through college baseball, just to be honest, because Texas A&M fans hated it. I know Canes we were talking about the other day, but a lot of pressure on Michael Early, right? First time as a head coach. He's been an assistant coach for almost 10 years in college baseball. But certainly it was a surprise that he got the job. Most people in the industry thought, all right, A&M's going to try to make a big splash. They're going to go after someone big and just offer him a boatload of money. Well, it just turned out that all the coaches, because this is the thing, when you're going after that tier of a coach, one, they usually have so much security at the school they're at. You're talking about Tony Vitello types, which is like, why would he leave Tennessee? You're talking about Tim Corbin, who, again, a legend now in college baseball, pretty much can stay at Vandy as long as he wants. So A&M may be able to offer a little bit more money, but can they offer the security of, man, I got this job until I don't want it? Right? You could go to A&M and get bigger money for 3-4 years, and all of a sudden you're not doing great, you're gone. And that's not to say, again, in college baseball now, it is changing. When you are a top earner like that in college baseball, I mean, the pressure on you to win, it doesn't matter if you're a legend anymore. If you're getting paid over $1 million a year to coach college baseball, like, you better be winning. And that's why you saw some shakeup at Vandy this past year or this past summer. Just because the offense was not doing what they thought it should be doing. But back to A&M, Michael Early, I mean, to be first-time head coach and taking over at the preseason number 1 team in the country, that is a lot of pressure. That is a lot of pressure. And again, it's a lot of pressure to win now. You know, and from the people I know in the industry, what was basically the way that Early got the job is Schloss leaves for Texas. And everyone thinks, all right, A&M's going to make a big splash, try to land someone big. It seemed like they couldn't do that. But there was also something going on behind the scenes. And that was a lot of the recruits and all of A&M's guys in the portal were basically saying, we're gone unless Early gets the job. And you're talking about Chase Lavalette, you know, some other guys who were stars that had gone in the portal. I mean, projected number 1 overall pick in Chase Lavalette. And so that's a lot of leverage that Michael Early had. And obviously he put in for the job, but I think really what got him that job was, hey, we could have a really good team next year, or we could have all these guys leave, and then who knows what happens. And then maybe we lose the momentum that the program had gained over the last 5 or 6 years. Obviously, A&M's always been a great program, but I mean, certainly, you know, what they had done under Schlossnagel was kind of a next level type thing. And so with Early, the good thing for him is, you know, hired Jason Kelly as the associate head coach, who was, you know, the head coach at University of Washington, and had done a decent job there. But you've seen now, and you are seeing a lot of head coaches this past summer leaving their jobs to take assistant jobs. You think about Liberty's head coach, Scott Kelly, I think. Or not Kelly, sorry, Scott Fitzgerald. Let me see here. I don't want to mess the name up. All right, here we go. Scott Jackson. I'm an idiot. So Scott Jackson left Liberty to take an assistant job at UNC. Jason Kelly leaves Washington to take an assistant job at A&M. Mazzello from Ohio State takes the job at TCU. So he was head coach at Ohio State, took a assistant job back at TCU. And one of the things that I was hearing from coaches was that it was kind of looked at like, you just don't have the recruiting resources. And that's not to say you can't win at programs like that. I mean, Scott Jackson won at Liberty all the time. But maybe felt like if I want to get a big time job, he's got to go back to the Power 4 type school as an assistant. Jason Kelly, again, University of Washington, went from LSU and back to as an assistant in the SEC. And Mazzello back to TCU in the Big 12. So you saw a lot of that, but that's good for Early. I mean, really a kind of a veteran proven pitching coach in Jason Kelly. Hired Caleb Longley, who was with Texas. He was the recruiting coordinator and hitting coach at Texas. And then the next assistant is Will Fox, who had been at A&M for a while, 6 seasons. So again, a lot of pressure on A&M here. This is not a typical number 1 team, especially with a brand new head coach who's never been a head coach before, pretty young guy too. So a lot of pressure for them. And what'll be interesting is we're going to look at kind of what the 2025 or 2024 end of the year rankings were, but Virginia, number 2, LSU, number 3. A lot of pressure at LSU based on how the season ended last year, I would think. But again, reloaded. Josh Jordan, Jay Johnson, the Fighting JJs. None of these rankings should surprise us here at the top 5 or 10. Tennessee, number 4, of course. Arkansas, North Carolina, Oregon State, who is an independent this year, not in any conference. It's going to be interesting to see how that works for them. As far as not playing in a conference tournament, how's that going to affect their RPI and seeding and everything like that? If they are one of those maybe bubble teams to make it in, probably won't be. I mean, they're always kind of safe to get in with the schedule they play. They always finish pretty well. But maybe a kind of a on the bubble to host type team. And is that being outside of a conference going to hurt them? That's going to be interesting to watch. And let me know what you guys think, by the way, as we're going through this. Georgia at number 8. Again, I mean, what they've done at University of Georgia has been pretty remarkable. Just in less than 2 years. And you guys know I was talking to Brock Bennett the other day. He thinks their team's going to be really good. They think they're going to slug and they're going to pitch. That's basically, he said, with Wes Johnson at the helm, you're going to pitch. I mean, he proved that he came in right away and turned that team into a really good pitching team. Georgia really, here's the thing. Last year, Georgia really kind of overperformed what people expected. So they had always been they weren't projected to finish anywhere close in the top 10. I mean, they were projected to be like middle of the pack to bottom of the pack in the SEC. And that's just a sign of a really well-coached team when you just overperform consistently. And that's why, obviously I played at Georgia Tech in that regional that Georgia hosted with Georgia Tech in there. When I was talking to some of the guys at Georgia Tech staff, they felt like, man, as good as UGA had played all year, it was almost one of the most winnable regionals they had been in recently, because Georgia really, if you looked on paper, again, they weren't as talented as some of these other SEC hosts, but they just played way above their pay grade. And that's a credit to the coaching staff. And so Brock thinks that, he's like, we're going to slug and we're going to pitch. That's going to be our game plan. And so Georgia at number 8, Florida State number 9, Florida number 10. You're already seeing the pattern, right? SEC, ACC, SEC, ACC. And we'll go through and count them all. Florida, then Duke, Oregon, NC State, Wake Forest, Clemson, 3 ACCs in a row. All of these teams should be really good again. Vanderbilt, number 16, Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, Texas. Dallas Baptist. Then we got the fighting mid-majors here at the top 25. We got Dallas Baptist, Arizona, not a mid-major, UC Santa Barbara, TCU, Nebraska, and Troy. So you're seeing the pattern. You got, obviously, Dallas Baptist is like possibly the best mid-major year by year. You go with Coastal Carolina or Southern Miss or schools like that. But certainly Dallas Baptist is in that conversation as the best mid-major in baseball. Santa Barbara is in there as well. But what do we see, guys? It's SEC, ACC, Big 12. That's it. I mean, you see a few of the, the kind of the holdouts in the Pac-12. Nebraska in there at 24. But, I mean, it's basically ACC, SEC, Big 12. So we'll go SEC first. How many SEC schools do we got? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, you got 9 SEC schools. And again, you kind of like, the fact that they got Oklahoma and Texas bolsters them as well. I mean, the ACC brought in Stanford and Cal. And so Stanford, obviously, I forgot about that. Stanford's got to be in here, right? Is Stanford in here? Stanford not in the top 25. Really surprising. Where did they finish up last year? Okay, not in the top 25 last year. Usually, Stanford's always really good. I thought for sure they would be in there, but we'll see. And we'll talk about how these rankings, they're never accurate. All right, so the ACC, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7. So you got 9 SEC, 7 ACC. So 16 of your top 25, vast majority of your top 25 are ACC and SEC schools. I mean, that's We've all known that for the last couple of years. I mean, the SEC and the ACC are they are the two premier conferences in college baseball. And then you got the Big 12 with some remaining, and some mid majors and a few others out there. No Big 10 schools, right? And that's alarming, because usually you got a Michigan in there or an Indiana, or a few others, and you don't see that at all right now. Things could change, right? So let's see. Last year we had Tennessee, A&M, Kentucky, Florida State, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia, Florida, Clemson, Oregon State, Georgia, Oregon, West Virginia, Connecticut, Kansas State. Zach, who will be a preseason top 10 team that won't be ranked at the end of the season? Okay, this is our Oregon's Big 10. You're right now, Zach. You're right. The conference realignment of the Pac-12 has just totally screwed up my mind. Okay, let's look at these top 10. That's a good question, Zach, and let's see kind of. Oregon State will be, because they're going to play. I mean, they're probably non-conference early is going to be pretty weak. I don't know. I mean, this is the thing, Zach. Usually with these top 25 rankings, and the same is true with the preseason conference rankings, like who's going to finish where in the conference. I always say this when I'm on broadcast. I'm always like, these are like the top 4 or 5 teams are usually pretty accurate, especially in conference. But after that, it's just all projection. Because here's an example. Virginia Tech is always, last 3 or 4 years, has been projected to finish bottom of the ACC. And they always are fighting near the end. They're always way better than people think. Yeah, I mean, I like that one, Canes. I mean, Florida, of course, Florida's number 10. But Florida's coming off of like a pretty down year, and obviously they finished strong because they got into the tournament and did well, even though it was controversial. We've talked about it, that a lot of people didn't think they should have got in. But to me, I mean, here's the thing. Florida probably is, Florida State's got really good arms. Georgia's going to slug, and they've got arms. North Carolina may end up being number 1. I mean, it's going to depend on their offense, but North Carolina had 2 of the best freshmen I've seen pitch in college baseball last year on the weekend rotation. So, and they did really well on the weekend. North Carolina is going to be really good. They are going to be really good. Tennessee's going to reload. We know that. Arkansas is going to be good. Virginia's, it's an O'Connor coach team. They're going to play fundamentally sound. Kevin McMullen, all those guys, they know what they're doing. I think this is my maybe my shot in the dark. I'm going to be interested to see how A&M halfway through SEC schedule. They're super talented, but again, you got a new head coach, and they seem to love him. But it's not just about the players. It's about the staff. So, I mean, this is the think about this, guys. When have you ever seen a coach leave a program and then that program is the preseason number 1? I mean, I don't know if we've ever seen that. Right? It would be like if Jay Johnson left for LSU and then Arizona was ranked number 1 the next year. That never happens. And you credit to Michael Early, who the players loved him so much. They were like, if he gets the job, we're coming back. But A&M, that is going to be, you talk about game 1 pressure. You talk about like pressure on day 1. I mean, that's legit. Who could be an unranked team that could finish in the top 10? Okay, we'll get to that. Zach, we'll get to that in a second. But I think most likely is probably Florida, and I know that's like a scapegoat because they're number 10. But I just think they are coming off a year where they had Caglione, they had a really good team, and they just really underperformed. So that's the question. Are they going to kind of right the ship? As far as unranked teams, I mean, listen, I'll give you. I mean, I'll give you my alma mater as a team that could be ranked. Now, here's the problem. Looking at the report on Georgia Tech from D1 baseball and talking to their staff, I mean, they're going to be really young pitching wise. They're going to have some freshmen really step up. And that's just, you don't see that happen a lot in college, but it doesn't mean it can't happen, right? You saw UNC had 2 freshmen on the weekend rotation and they had the year they had. But that is, I think Georgia Tech is going to have, obviously you got Drew Burris in your lineup. The offense should be good. I mean, a James Ramsey offense is always near the top of the ACC in runs scored and, batting average. So, I mean, they're going to hit. But the question for Georgia Tech, and it has been for the last 6 years, even maybe longer than that, is, man, are they going to pitch enough? And I think, Matt Taylor, you saw some improvement last year. If you're a Georgia Tech fan, you're looking for another jump and improvement this year. Especially as, he was able to help at least land a few 24s maybe. Certainly, generally by that third year, I mean, you're bringing in guys that you recruited. But again, I mean, the hallmarks of a good pitching coach and a good hitting coach is they not only can they bring in the right recruits, but they can instantly impact the team that they're working with. And so you saw that a little bit last year. Albeit again with kind of a young pitching staff, and you had young guys that had to step up. It's going to be the same thing this year. You're going to have a lot of young guys step up, and I do think they do really like their freshman arms, but you just never know how they're really going to perform until the games start. You just never know. You don't know if they're a Fall American or an All American until the games start. So, as far as that, Zach, I mean, listen. Let's see here. I mean, any other teams? I mean, I'll give you one. I mean, Kennesaw State, in my mind, they had some really good freshman arms last year. It's a mid-major team school, in Kennesaw, Georgia, just kind of north of Atlanta. I think they have a chance to be really good, just to be honest. Again, I mean, are they going to be a top 10 team? No, I mean, they're going to be, but do they have a chance to make it in the top 25? 100%. Top 10, I mean, they're really going to have to ball out. The problem with any mid-major is your record has to be so good to get into the top 10. Because, again, like if you have the same record as an SEC team, the SEC team's ranked higher than you. ACC team's ranked higher than you. So it's just a matter of that's my mid-major from the schools I saw last year, mid-major wise, who's got a real chance to break into the top 25, because they had when they were facing Georgia Tech last year, I mean, they had 3 or 4 freshmen coming in a row, and they were all bumping like 92, 95, throwing strikes, good off speed. So I thought, man, these guys, they could be good in a year or two. So, and again, here's what my prediction is, guys. Like, a lot of this is going to change, right? A lot of this is going to change. I mean, this is just kind of your run-of-the-mill. This is your run-of-the-mill, your first... Because this is the big thing with preseason rankings. You just never know for sure. Like, they could look great in the fall. Team could look like they got great chemistry. Players look like they're doing really well and have improved. And then all of a sudden... lights turn on and the players aren't as good. The other thing with Georgia Tech is I do know, from talking to them, is that Burris is a real leader on the team. And so if he's holding his teammates to a high standard that he holds himself, that does kind of, the best teams are not led by the coaches. The coaches set the standard and enforce the standard, but if they don't have leaders on the team that also buy in and hold the team accountable, they're never as good as they should be. And I do think Burris is one of those guys. And like, you're talking potentially the best player in college baseball. And so that has to mean something, right? You got the best player in college baseball for 2 more years, not just this year, but next year as well. So Georgia Tech, I mean, this is the time for Georgia Tech to really kind of, And again, these rankings are, doesn't merely mean anything. But I think they're on the short list to be. I wish they had given us like 10 teams that were close. Maybe that would have been good discussion. But here's another one. Here's another one that I'm a kind of a shot in the dark. But Boston College, guys. I mean, what Todd Interdonato, that system of offense he's going to run there. It was very obvious last year. I did all 3 games of the broadcast against Boston College and Georgia Tech. And it was very obvious that he did not have the type of guys that his offense needs. He runs all the time. I mean, he puts pressure on the defense. He bunts. They bunt for hits. They sack bunt while guys are double stealing. I mean, they just do. It's really fun to watch as a baseball kind of purist. And my thought watching it was, man, they came into Georgia Tech and kind of just totally threw a wrench in Georgia Tech's season because they ended up sweeping Georgia Tech, even though they were one of the worst teams in the ACC. And that's getting swept prevented Georgia Tech from being in the host conversation, because if Georgia Tech had won 2 of 3 or swept Boston College, if they swept, they're probably a host. And if they won 2 of 3, they're in hosting conversation. And so that series alone totally destroyed it. UCLA in the Big Ten. Yeah, I think you're right. They're not on the top 25 though. And so here's the so what I was getting to is, I think Boston College, if Todd Interdonato is able to, like, if he was able to really get guys he needed in the portal, because again, I think with his system, he needs like 3 years to really recruit the high schoolers he needs. But if he was able to kind of get a good amount of guys in the portal that he felt like can run his system, I think Boston College is kind of a dark horse in the ACC, because no one plays that type of offense. I mean, no one in the ACC or the SEC sees that type of offense ever. And it was very evident when they played Georgia Tech last year that it was just causing chaos in the pitchers' heads, because they're trying to double look, and then now they're not focused on the pit hitter. And now they just throw a meatball down the middle, and then they're double stealing. And so guys were just so out of whack. Dusty, just joining. What have we covered? We're talking about the top D1 baseball top 25. So if you want to look at it real quick, Dust, A&M number 1. And I was saying this, Dusty, have we ever seen a head coach leave a program? And so now Schloss leaves to go to Texas. And because Michael Early was hired, the assistant, they were able to retain all these guys in the portal. And now how much pressure is Michael Early under, Dusty, as the preseason number 1, according to D1 baseball, as a first-time head coach in the SEC? First-time head coach, period, but in the SEC as a preseason number 1. Like, this is the question, guys. And if someone wants to look up, let me see. I don't know see if we can figure out what the contract looked like. See if we can find this here. So I don't know if there's any details about Michael Early's contract. If any of you guys can find that, I just don't know if he's under, like, did he get a 5-year deal? Did he get a 2-year, 3-year deal? I mean, I would imagine he probably got 3 or 4 years. But the question is this, Dusty, like, how much pressure is Michael Early under as the preseason number 1 team in the country, especially if he didn't get like a long, like a 5-year deal? Because, if you come out as preseason number 1 and all of a sudden, you're finishing like 35 and 22 or something on the year, that's going to be looked at as like, man, did we hire the right guy right away? Because most of the time, especially as especially like think of Tony Vitello, for example, when he was an assistant at Arkansas, he took over at Tennessee. Tennessee was like bottom of the barrel of the SEC. So there was no pressure really to win day one. That administration knew he was going to have to kind of rebuild the program. And because of that, there's not a whole lot of pressure on you. But as Michael Early, first time head coach, preseason number one. So if you don't make it to a super regional this year, probably a disappointment, right? Texas A&M has that oil money, though. Firing him is a rounding error for those fellas. Yeah, I mean, true. But for him personally, I mean, I think probably maybe the most pressure for any first-year head coach, maybe in history. Because you're preseason number one, according to D1 Baseball. And I think D1 Baseball, I don't know what you think, Dusty, but, maybe probably the most accurate preseason rankings, just because they go see everyone and their ground game's really good. I mean, they see all these teams. Zach, exactly. Look at Jimbo Fisher's buyout. They paid that like it was nothing. Yeah. And well, the other thing is look at A&M football, right? They spent, I think, the most money in NIL when Jimbo Fisher was there. I mean, they were paying guys ridiculous amount of money, let alone how much they paid him, and they still were just not great. And so that's what. And I will say, like, I think football, the coach has definitely more impact on individual games and your staff than in baseball. But certainly, baseball is not just the players going out there and playing. And so the head coach strategy, his bullpen management, adjustments defensively they're making in the game, pitch calling, and Early's not going to be calling pitches. I mean, that's going to be Jason Kelly. But still, probably the most pressure for any first-year head coach in maybe the history of college baseball. Well, maybe Danny Hall, if you think about it, Dust. Maybe DH coming in year one with the stacked lineup. That's probably comparable. But again, you weren't in this era of college baseball where people are making millions of dollars and all that. I think I agree. I think he gets a pass this year regardless, but better have it figured out in year two. Yeah. No, I mean, certainly, unless they just completely just are terrible, there's no way he's getting fired after 1 year. But I will say the doubt will set in immediately because, everything I heard, Dusty, was that essentially he got the job because all these players in the portal who, potential number one overall pick, Jace Lavalette, a couple really good arms, other position players all went in the portal, and they basically kind of had leveraged, and they said, we'll come back if you hire Michael Early. And that's not to say A&M didn't think highly of Michael Early. He's very, very highly thought of in the coaching sphere, but certainly no one expected him to be the guy that ended up getting the job. I think most people thought A&M was going to make a big splash and go after someone big. But the players and recruits and the recruits in high school and the guys in the portal were like, hey, we're going to decommit if Early's not given the job. So I think A&M played kind of the short-term game, and they're kind of hoping and banking on they found a really good young head coach, like a Tony Vitello type, who ended up being just like the best hire Tennessee could have made. So we'll see. But definitely, like you said, Dustin, when you're preseason number one, it's pretty hard for the season not to be a disappointment, right? If you just if you host a regional and don't make it to supers, it's disappointment. And I think unless they just really have an amazing year, that doubt is going to set in about, hey, did we make? Yeah, we got those guys in the portal, but it didn't turn out as great as we thought. So, Dusty, I want your opinion. Who is a team? This is what we're talking about. A team maybe in this top 10 right here who will not be in the top 25 by year's end. And I'll tell you who I picked. And then also a team outside of the top 25 that will be in the top 10 by year's end. Kyle, you need to fly. You need to fly Canes up to Atlanta and have him join the pod. Yeah, maybe. Hey, if this thing keeps getting bigger and bigger, we might have to do that. Or maybe I go down for a series in Miami and we do a live podcast down there somewhere. That would be great. Dusty, I want your opinion, and I'll take your comment away so you can see. Okay, of this top 10, Texas A&M, Virginia, LSU, Tennessee, Arkansas, North Carolina, Oregon State, Georgia, Florida State, Florida, which of these teams will not be in the top 10 by year's end? Or maybe not even be in the top 25, but you can pick one. I think North Carolina's got a chance to be... No. Carolina, I think, has got a chance to be like top 2, top 3. They had two of the best freshmen. On the weekend rotation last year, and they were studs. So I mean, they're going to have one of the best rotations in the ACC. And if all they had to do is go get like one, like Carolina, I think the question mark is going to be, they lost some bats, but their pitching is going to be so good that if they went in the portal and got one big time arm for their weekend rotation, I mean, they're going to be really tough to beat. Florida, to me, is the one I picked just because I think they had a really good team last year, some big-time names, and really underperformed. So I think there is kind of some pressure there to, play well. And so to me, it kind of stupid because they're number 10. So it's like, well, yeah, they're the lowest ranked of the top 10. But I just think Florida's the most likely. Dan Kerrigan, what's up, Dan? Bounce back here for Auburn. 3 nice transfers and 2 potential first rounders led by Irish. Yeah, no, I think Auburn. Auburn, I think, definitely is one of those teams outside of the top 25 that could be. And the thing is this, Dan, Auburn always starts really slow. Like I talked to Butch about this like the last couple years when I've gone down to do broadcasts. I'm like, you guys always seem to be like, they always seem to be like 4-8 or something in the first 3 or 4 weekends. And then they finish strong, man. I mean, so I think like Auburn's thing is like, man, can they get going early in the SEC play? Because they just always seem to start out slow. I mean, talking to them before our flight to the ABCA, talking to Butch and Carl told me, he's like, man, we're still like, I think everyone's really trying to figure out what the formula is to win in this like super offensive climate. Cause he said, when I was playing from 2011 to 2013, it was like the BB core bats just got brought in. They were terrible. You were using the old balls. They went nowhere. And so if you had decent pitching, you were fine. And if you had really good bats with decent pitching, like you were going to win. And he was basically saying it's kind of the opposite now. Like if you have decent bats with this in this offensive climate, like they're going to put runs on the board. But if you have just decent pitching, they're going to give up way too many runs to win. So I think Auburn's I think they're kind of thinking, I think moving forward, like, and Butch said the same thing. He's like, we're going to elite pitching. That's what we're going to go after. And that's what we are going after. And something Butch said that was interesting was he said, typically in years past, he had always kind of game planned with the pitcher and the catcher and let the catcher call the game. He felt like he had a lot of success doing that. And so I think he said he was going to go back to that maybe. So we'll see. See how it plays out for them. Dusty, UGA going to be a problem. Yeah, I mean, Wes Johnson, you have a legit, and this is again, kind of goes to show what Butch and Carl were saying is that you have a big league pitching coach who's basically had his pitchers just pitch everywhere he's been since he left Major League Baseball, so LSU and Georgia. And last year, again, they were not projected to be anything close to what they were, and they really overperformed. And talking to Brock Bennett offensively, like he said, Wes loves bats. Like he wants guys that are going to slug. He's like, we may not be the most athletic team, That's not kind of that's not what his style is right now. Like he wants guys that can hit it out of the park. And so he's like, we're going to pitch and we're going to slug, and that's what our game plan is going to be. So Georgia's, they're going to try to hit home runs and strike guys out and throw strikes. Like that's their game. I think Georgia's going to be really good this year. Again, I think that it's amazing how that 1 year can totally change your recruiting at Georgia. And Georgia Tech's feeling that too now, because you got a big league pitching coach as a head coach in the same state. So I mean that's going to be an issue. UVA always going to be a problem. They always pitch. They always have just really good athletes. They always play really good defense, really well coached. Kane says, I have us going 35-21. It's contingent on our midweek games. I have us going 9-3 in midweeks. That's bold, Canes, because Florida may be the toughest state in midweeks in the country. You think about it, you got really all the Southeast states. You got Florida, really tough midweeks. Georgia, really tough midweeks. Alabama, really tough midweeks. You got UAB, Samford, Troy, South Alabama. Texas as well. You got Dallas Baptist, Texas State, and a few others. So I mean, those states are really the hardest. So I mean, going 9 and again, like your Power 4 schools should win the majority of their midweeks, but still. Dan Kerrigan, UJ real portal heavy. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, listen, everyone's going real portal heavy, to be honest. Talking to Carl last week, I mean, he was like, nobody wants to do it, but you can't compete. The portal guys are just better, and you know what you're getting. You may really hit on a high school guy that turns out to be a star, like a Drew Burris type or a Ford at Virginia, Daniel Cuvée at Miami. But the rest of them, it's kind of flip the coin, and they're either not ever going to play for you or they're like a pretty good player. And with the portal guys, you're really not flipping a coin. It's like you're flipping a coin, that's a 10-sided coin, and like 8 sides are going to be a really good player. So like you're going to flip that coin over the 50-50 coin every time. And I think, Dan, just to get back a little bit, that's pretty typical for most coaches when they first take over. Because again, you're bringing in guys you didn't recruit and you may not like, and you may not evaluate as good enough players for what you want. So your first couple years as a head coach now, I mean, you're bringing in a lot of portal guys because you want to bring in guys you think are good and you can win with. Zach Lesnar, thoughts on Miami? You think they get to a regional this year? Feels like if not, we will be getting a new coach. I mean, I don't know if it's that extreme, Zach. I don't know if it's that if it's going to be that bad and that much pressure on JD. I could be wrong. But I just think Miami, to me, they got to be real. They got to get those South Florida players, man. They got to get them. I mean, Miami has always done great with South Florida players, and they usually get a few other guys out of state. They recruit nationally, but that South Florida area, man, Miami's got to dominate it. And I'll say this: reading the report on D1 baseball, I told Canes I was worried. I mean, that was not a report, and JD even said in interviews, he goes, "Listen, we didn't get like big time superstars in the portal. We got guys that need to prove themselves." So to me, it could go well. You never know, but to me, that's alarm bells are ringing when you're hearing that. All right, I have an actual meeting now. BRB messed up, man. Skip the meeting. We play Florida Atlantic, Florida International, Florida Gulf Coast, UCF, Bethune-Cookman, and Villanova in the midweek. Is it a 2-game series, or is that your non-conference weekend? No way Villanova's flying 10,000 miles from the state of Washington to play one game. That's your I'm guessing that's your non-conference weekends series. I have us losing to UCF. Okay. UConn series will be interesting. Yeah, I mean UConn is always. I mean they're always good, man. They're always good, and they're kind of one of those teams that's always underrated because again they're like Northeast team, but they're always good. They're always good. Let's see here. Canes, we need to win that series. After that series, I have us losing 3 out of 5 series after that. I'll say this, man, Canes, you can't predict anything because last year, looking at Georgia Tech's schedule, when they got swept by Boston College, the second half for Georgia Tech was a gauntlet. I mean, it was a nightmare. And I mean, me and all my buddies that played at Georgia Tech, we were doing the math. I mean, we're just like, man, like even if you go 50, I mean, these are not series that you just win series. I mean, this is the part of the schedule where you win a series, you lose a series, you win a series, you lose a series. I mean, we just thought, man, there's very little chance we get back to 500 looking at that. And then Georgia Tech ended up playing really well and beating a lot of teams they were not expected to beat. So it's really tough to predict. And the other thing is this, even based on rankings and projections, some teams are going to be way worse than expected. Some teams are going to be way better than expected. So it's hard to really predict. It definitely is that extreme. We are not good. He is 100% gone. You think so, Canes? You think JD's gone? Really? To me, I mean, if they obviously not, he's not gone. But like if they don't. I mean, he gets 2 years. I mean, literally, he's been the head. This will be his second year as head coach. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, guys, I don't think can't have another season like last year. Sure, one game against Villanova. They must be coming. They must. I guarantee. Yeah, they're playing a weekend series down South Florida or somewhere close, and then they're going down to you guys. Because that makes no sense. Villanova probably plays UCF that week, or someone close. Canes, former players are concerned, but they aren't at practice. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think if we do what I predict, we likely can host. That would be 16-14 in the ACC. I mean, to me, I get former players being concerned. And again, I mean. I think it's understated what kind of impact a coach has on his team's production on the field. I think a lot of people think baseball is kind of just like, oh, well, the players aren't great. And it's like, well, if your coach isn't great, that's actually impacts the game way more than people think. But I think 1 year is like way too short. I mean, I think JD gets one more after this, even if this year's bad. But who knows? I mean, Miami is the kind of program that will kind of panic. And kind of, jump ship. Villanova plays us on Wednesday, then a weekend series at USF. Okay, that makes sense. First 5 series for the Canes: Gators, UConn, Wake, FSU, UNC. Whoa! Well, I mean, you're going to know that's what. Okay, let's look at our board here. So they play Gators, number 10, UConn, which is going to be a really good team, Wake, who's 15, 14, FSU number 9, and UNC. So they're playing, again, this is preseason, right? These could change. Florida, Wake, FSU, UNC all could be out of the top 25 by the time they play. But to face the 3 preseason top 10s, 1 preseason 14, and UConn, who's always a really good program, Canes, you're going to know in those first couple weekends. I mean, I'm guessing that's... So your first series of the year is against the Florida? Is that what you're saying? Or is that the first series of the year, or that's like the first kind of big series? That's usually Georgia Gators, that's third weekend in, I thought, usually. I have us beating UConn and FSU. It's like 1,000% if we don't make the tournament, he is out. Yeah. He can't because of the coaches we did offer the job to. We interviewed the Duke coach, Wake coach, South Carolina, and Troy Tulowitzki. Yeah, I mean, obviously Chris Pollard's done a great job at Duke. I mean, he's turned them into, again, I mean, the preseason, right? I mean, they're number 11 preseason. And at Duke, which is high academic requirements. So that, I mean, he's done a heck of a job there. Obviously, Wake. I just don't think Wake's coach is ever going to leave Wake Forest to me. I mean, I feel like he's kind of comfortable there. And there's something to be said about you've built the program now. It's just, to me, like the older a coach gets, usually the less likely he is to move. I mean, Tom Walter's been there, since right when I started playing at Georgia Tech. Anyway, I just don't think Tom Walter leaving, to be honest. Wake, unless it's just a crazy offer. In South Carolina, which coach from South Carolina did you guys interview? Zach. No, Niagara and Princeton are the first two. Okay. Yeah, I mean, usually your first two are kind of like Northeast schools that are coming down to the warm weather, and then you're playing maybe your rival. Like for Georgia Tech, it's usually UGA that third weekend, ever since it got moved to a weekend series, which will be a good test for Georgia Tech. That's why starting 9-0 is so important. We start with Niagara, FAU, and Princeton. Yeah. Especially, I mean, think about what a lot of people don't realize, those first 3 weekends and then the midweeks, I mean, that's what kills your RPI. I mean, if you start out slow and you lose, 2 or 3 to a Niagara or to a Princeton, all of a sudden you finish like 500 or one below 500 in the ACC, like your RPI, I mean, you may not be getting in. FAU, FIU, FGCU mixed in there. Yep. Wake's invested a lot in baseball too. Yeah, I mean, and again, Wake, South Carolina's new head coach, Paul Maneri, or Mark Kingston, who was at UCF before that. Yeah, Wake, I mean, that pitching lab. I mean, they have a lot of like kind of interns and like guys like that are really, their program is really well supported. I do think Wake kind of needs, I think they need an update in facilities as far as the stadium. It's still like when you go there, you're kind of like, it's behind. And for where it's been year by year now for the last 4 or 5 years, you would think and I think they may be getting, maybe they already have, let me see here, Wake Forest baseball. See if we see anything. I don't know if maybe you guys can find something. I don't want to spend like a year looking through stuff. Their head coach, we've lost 1 game the last 2 years to a team like Princeton or Niagara. Yeah. I mean, those should be like sweeps. I mean, it's just how it is. Zach, Paul, Maneri. Okay. I just don't, man. My thing is this. I was really surprised by that hire. Because remember when he was at LSU, it was like I think he had some health issues from what I had heard, talking to like some older coaches in the industry that are kind of around his age that knew him well. And to me, I was really surprised by that hire from South Carolina, because it's just like he's not the coach of the future to me. because I just don't think he's got. Maybe he's going to coach another 10 years, but that's not the. When you basically step away and retire from LSU and you're already up there in age, it's just surprising. That doesn't mean he can't come in and just have a lot of success. It was just surprising to me because I thought he was basically done. Yeah, from Skip. Yeah, from Skip Bertman. Yeah. But to me, it's just kind of how all these coaching hires have gone. You either have gone with like the 40 to 50-year-old proven Power 4 coach and kind of just pay him a lot more money, or you go after that top assistant like a Tony Vitello, or a head coach who's coached and who's been an assistant in the Power 4 and is now a head coach at a mid-major and doing well, like Skylar Meade at Troy. That's kind of, and I actually thought Skylar Meade had a shot at South Carolina because he had been the pitching coach there and done a good job as a pitching coach, and then had done a good job at Troy. Yeah. The recruiting coordinator is going to be the head coach in 2 to 3 years. Are you talking about at South Carolina? It's not Monty Lee, is it? Is Monty Lee the recruiting coordinator? I got to check. The SEC is just so hard, man. You're talking about Terry Rooney? Monty's associate head coach, hitting coach. The recruiting coordinator is Terry Rooney. I was pretty sure it wasn't Monty. Monty Lee. Oh yeah, I mean, I have heard that too. I mean, the thing that's a little bit iffy is obviously he was a head coach at Clemson and did like started his tenure there, started out really, really well, and then they kind of fell off. So it'd be interesting to see if he would be the guy they would go to. He was a recruit. Okay, yeah, he was a recruiting coordinator under Kingston. Yeah. Do you still need a master's to be a head coach at the D1 level? I don't think so. I mean, a lot of coaches are doing that now. And it's a bit ridiculous, just to be honest with you. Like the idea that to be a head coach, you need like a master's in like coaching or teaching or something. Like, sure, that's great. You definitely do need a 4-year degree. I think that is one of the requirements. But unless something's changed, I don't think you have to have a master's to be the head coach. I could be wrong. I'm not really sure. He was the recruiting coordinator. Yeah. I know he's the one that handles the recruiting. Maybe. Monty's a heck of a recruiter. I'll say that. What you'll find, guys, like there's guys who are really good recruiters and they're not real good kind of operators, administrators as a head coach. That's not to say Monty wasn't, but I mean, he was kind of like, they had a good tenure and then they kind of fell off, and he was ultimately, ousted from Clemson. And I think really one of the things that really hurt him is he was kind of, his calling is like a hitting guy. And Clemson's offense kind of like, they were really good for a while and then they kind of fell off. But it would be interesting if he got the South Carolina head coaching job in a couple of years. My thing is what a lot of times, and you'll find this happens everywhere, but you'll take, schools are way more likely to hire a guy like Monty Lee as a head coach over a hot young assistant, maybe top assistant in the game. They're way less likely to hire that guy because it just doesn't have that head coaching experience, even though he may be the best candidate. And that's why I think the interview process is so important. to have an idea of which coach you're gonna, you want to hire. And to me, I think now more than ever, way more too much emphasis is put on. Well, has he been a head coach before? Because it's like, well, if he's been a head coach, that's great. But if he, his record's just been okay, like you're seeing past results and expecting different results in a new situation. To me, that's my thing. But who knows? I mean, we just have to wait and kind of see how that ends up going, if that does happen. Sounds like portal versus high school kids for coaches. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of that way. Just with how much money now is involved in the Power Four with coaches. I mean, schools want to get a for sure thing, but the reality is, like, if you're hiring a guy who's been a head coach and the results have just been okay or like decent, again, you're kind of hoping for a better result than what you've already seen, especially when a coach like has come from a school like Clemson, who's got a ton of resources and a lot of support and some of the best facilities in the country. I mean, their clubhouse, guys, go look up Clemson's clubhouse. I mean, it's better than big league clubhouses I've been in. It's insane. Perfect Game released their 26 to 40. Stanford is at 40. Stanford at 40 is crazy to me. Miami not in there is not surprising. UConn at 35. Let me see here. And then I got a few more minutes and I got to go here. I can't even. Okay, 26 to 40. Okay, I think Georgia Tech. I see Georgia Tech in there at 38. All right. Okay. Georgia Tech at 38. Wait, that was 2024. See, perfect game. I mean, the perfect game's got UNC at 19, and yeah. Where do they have? Is Georgia Tech on there, Canes? Bad sign for us. Hopefully the rankings are wrong. I mean, like I said, guys, Virginia Tech every year is like projected to finish like dead last in the ACC, and every year they ball out or they way overperform. Was Georgia Tech in there, Canes, before I get off? Let me see here. Just tag me on Twitter. Okay, perfect. Let's see here. Okay, so that was okay. So the one I saw on their website was right. So Virginia Tech at 29. See, Virginia Tech, I mean, actually pretty good. And again, like, who's it made up of, right? It's, SEC, ACC, SEC, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, UConn, ACC. I mean, it's just like the top 40. It's like literally the top 40 is full of like every SEC and ACC team. Yeah, I see it. Thanks for. All right, guys. That's it for today. We'll be back again tomorrow, more on schedule now that everything's set up and everything. But thanks for joining in, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. And we may have some, news coming.